listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What is up? Thanks for tuning in and welcome to the Straight to Video podcast. Alright, on today's show I get to welcome my friend Mr. Jim Dalton, who is the lead guitarist for the band Roger Clyne and The Peacemakers and frontman for his own Outlaw Country band, the Railbenders. Jim and I both met when we toured the UK together back in 2018 and then again in the US during the spring of 2019. Jim was actually the first member of the band I met when I was late getting to the first show in Leeds, and we both found ourselves locked outside the Brudenell Club. Both bands had the best time on each of those tours, and Jim, along with every member of the Peacemakers, their crew and their incredible fan base, are some of the most friendly and warm people you could wish to meet. Now, whilst Jim has been writing and performing in bands for many, many years, he's only now getting ready to release his debut solo album, In My Head, which is available from jimdaltonmusic.com, and it really is such a fun collection of tunes which I urge you all to go check out. Before we get into the chat, I want to give my usual shout outs to Dead Skull Coffee, who continue to support the show, and if you like quality ground or full bean coffee with a rock and roll attitude, then head on over to deadskullcoffee.co.uk. Drop some in your shopping basket and add the promo code STV on checkout and you'll get a great 15% discount. Also, any guitarists and bassists out there who would like to strap some of the finest handmade guitar strings on their guitars, then please consider our friends New Tone Strings. I've been using their strings on my basses for many years now and they're easily the finest I've had. Check out newtonestrings.com, and once again, we got the promo code for you, which is STV10, and that will give you a great discount. And finally, if you're a regular listener to the show and continue to tune into these chats, please consider maybe becoming a patron of the show over at our Patreon page, where you can get behind the scenes access, early heads up on guests, a bonus podcast, and some exclusive merch by simply signing up at patreon.com/STVpod. And a big thank you to all of you who are already on board. Okay, I'm sure you're going to really enjoy this chat with Jim Dalton. He has a real warm and fun manner and shares some great stories all about growing up in Colorado, his first gigs and bands, his family's influence on his music, and also how he got the gig with the Peacemakers. All of it is great to learn about, so please enjoy my straight to video chat with my mate Jim Dalton.
On a Saturday night, when some guy starts talking tough and tries to pick in a fight, I might have punched him in the nose if it was back in the day, but I just shook his hand and bought his beer. It's better that way. It's better that way. It's better that way. It's better that way. It's better that way.
This is early, so I'm having a cup of joe while we're starting this.
Excellent. We might get some dogs barking at some point because my wife's fixing to come home at any time, and the dogs will just lose the shit when she comes in.
I got that too here.
So, are you like born and raised in Colorado?
So I was born in upstate New York, in Rochester. My father was in the Air Force, and he got sent to Clovis, New Mexico when he was in the service, and he met my mom at a dance, like a military dance. They fell in love. He took her back to New York. He went off to Vietnam, fought in the war. My grandparents took care of my mom there while he was away. And then he came back, thank goodness. And his father, my grandfather, worked for Kodak. They remember the old Eastman Kodak? They were just a monster company back then. And he got a job with them and started moving up through the ranks and got a promotion. And they said, hey, we want to send you to our new plant in Colorado, Windsor, Colorado. And he took the management job there. And that's how we ended up in Colorado. And I grew up there starting about the age of 5, so I consider myself a Colorado native.
Colorado looks a wonderful place. It's somewhere that's always eluded me.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're always welcome here. We got a room for you.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. How does it compare to other places in the country? 'Cause obviously you've seen everywhere.
So it definitely is a very special place, especially the mountains. I'm in the city, down in Denver, so it's very big city-ish, and it's growing fast. Cost of living is crazy here right now. Everyone wants to move to Colorado. Call it kind of like the gold rush, the modern gold rush. Ever since we legalized, we're one of the very first states to legalize marijuana. Everyone started moving here.
That's a big magnet for everybody.
Oh yeah, it was, so it's grown. It's crazy how much it's grown. But my favorite part about Colorado is getting up to the mountains. It's just beautiful up there. The weather's almost always perfect in the summer, and, we were by a little lake. People are on their stand-up paddle boards and kayaks, and super quiet, and just a special place. Colorado is notorious for, or not notorious, but famous for their trails and their outdoor activities. And it's just very serene, and you're out of cell range. You don't have anything to think about except for if you're going to see a moose or a hawk or an eagle.
A great reset button.
It really is. Yeah, it's beautiful. I recommend you come out and check it out for yourself.
Well, I need to come out because I want to go to Boulder, Colorado, where Mork and Mindy was set.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my all-time favorite shows. I want to see the house.
Yep.
That's not too far from Denver, right?
No, it's only a little short drive. It's about 30 minutes.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So I know some of your family are musical. Was it your uncle Terry Dalton? He was quite well known. Yes.
He was like a local legend around here. He was a folk singer, songwriter. Him with his New York ties. You've probably heard of Dave Von Ronk, who was a legendary Greenwich Village kind of figure around there during the Dylan days and in the 60s. And he knew Dave Von Ronk and came out here and kind of created that same culture in Denver, in the little pubs and they did their song swaps and sharing stories. He had all the great stories. And so, yeah, my uncle was a huge influence on me because when I was a kid, he was the guy that had the guitar, long hair, and I thought he was so cool. And he's playing Dylan songs for the family, and everyone's gathered around him. And when you're 6 or 7 years old, or however old I was probably around there, and you see that, and you're like, what is this music thing? Wow, these people really like this. And
see that connection between people, and it looks cool and all that kind of thing.
All my friends are looking up to all the sports guys, all the football players and baseball players. And I'm looking up to my uncle, who's this cool guy with this guitar, and he's got this magic ability to bring in people and gather around and create this, like you said, connection. And so that was a early impression I had of my uncle. And then later, my dad and my mom divorced when I was about 9, and he couldn't handle the corporate life. He was kind of a reckless, wild, free spirit. So he took off. He was a musical lover too, which he probably got from he didn't play music, but he loved music. He had a passion for it. And he ended up finding himself as a roadie for the Doobie Brothers in the 70s and just took off and traveled the country. And I thought that was, how cool is that? Like, he had gypsy blood, and I had a little bit of that myself. I'm like, how amazing would it be to be able to just travel around and play music and tour the world? And so when I guess I was about 10 years old or 11 years old, he came through town with the Doobies. And he brought me and my brother to a show at Red Rocks.
Wow. The famous venue.
Yeah. One of the, maybe the best venue in the world. And in fact, the Doobies used to say that was their favorite venue to play. But he took us they were staying at I think it was a Holiday Inn in Golden. And all the Doobie Brothers were there by the pool, hanging out, just chilling. And I'm by the pool playing shuffleboard with the Doobie Brothers. I think at the time it was Willie Weeks. And then we go to the show. So that was fun in and of itself. But then we go to the show, and we're standing. If your listeners don't know what Red Rocks is, it's this beautiful, natural, outdoor amphitheater on the side of a mountain, literally made out of red rocks. It was built in the 40s. I think Franklin Delano Roosevelt commissioned it and hired a bunch of people to build this thing in the side of the mountain. And it's just unbelievable when you go there for the first time. Well, we got to go for our first time and be on the stage, backstage, behind this divider where we could see the band, side stage, but we could also look up the side of the mountain and see the crowd, which is about 9,000 strong. Sold out show. And when you're looking up from Red Rocks, it looks like a wall of people. It looks like it goes straight up. It's the most incredible thing you can ever see. It's unbelievable. It's this weird illusion. So I'm looking at this wall of humanity down, looking at me and looking at this band. And at that very moment, I said, I want to do this.
Right there and then.
Yeah. I somehow have to be involved in this thing called live music. It was just an amazing experience, had a huge impression on me, huge impact. So you kind of asked about my uncle and my family, if a musical family. My dad wasn't musical, but he was instrumental in starting that, as well as my mom, who bought an acoustic guitar for herself and wanted to start taking lessons, but she never did. It was sitting in a closet, and one afternoon in the summer, I picked it up. She was away at work, and I just started messing with it. And I just became obsessed. And the first day she came home, and I had the guitar, and I'd been playing it all day, and I had learned Wipeout. I figured it out on my own.
Just on one string?
Yeah. Well, it was on two strings. The notes, the single notes. And she said, how did you learn that? And I go, I just kind of played it by ear. And she's like, I'm getting you lessons. So there was a guy down the block that gave lessons, and she bought my first lessons for me, and then went from there. So that's how I started. It was due to my family, for sure.
That's great. You had these almost two, not polar opposites, but two kind of different, unique experiences. One from like your uncle, just seeing him and getting a vibe off that, but then actually going to that show and experiencing it. So that was your first live show, was it, at Red Rocks?
So my dad did take us to a show prior to that when he was also working with REO Speedwagon. So we saw REO Speedwagon before me and my little brother went. So we saw REO at a place that doesn't exist anymore. It's called the Pepsi Center. No, it wasn't even Pepsi Center. It was McNichols Arena, where the Denver Nuggets played, and they had a lot of shows. So that was our first show, and that was great. That was my first show ever, actually. Your first concert is a big deal. It's like, whoa.
Just that sound.
Yeah, but the Red Rocks experience was the one that really hooked me in.
What other shows have you seen there? Is it somewhere you've been quite a few times over the years?
Oh, back in the day when I went through my metal phase, I saw the Scorpions, I saw Motley Crue, I saw Rat, Whitesnake, and then I went through my alternative music phase, and I got to see guys way back in the day, like Howard Jones. In Excess I saw several times, but I think I saw them there. So many, My band actually got to play there as part of a summer concert series. The Railbenders got to play there, part of a concert series, and that was nice.
How was it for you playing there after all that time?
It was great. It was kind of funny. I was expecting it's going to be like the Doobie Brothers show, and then we get there, and it's so big, and we were just a local band, and there's people just scattered around. It was kind of spread out, and it was part of a music and film series where they have a band play live, and then they show a movie on the big screen. So I guess you could say that we opened up for Clint Eastwood because they showed The Unforgiven that night.
All right. That's a unique thing to say on your resume.
I know, right? So it was like, we don't know how many people are here for us and how many people are here for the movie. So it wasn't quite as magical as I thought it was going to be. But it was neat.
Excellent. So what were some of the early bands you got into? You say you went through several phases. Who were the first band which you kind of latched onto?
So it was a real hodgepodge of music. So many different influences, because my parents they were like hippies, 60s children. So they had in the house we had vinyl, and it was the Doors, it was the Beatles, it was the Stones. And then we'd have these interesting things thrown in, like Chuck Mangione, who was the French horn player from New York. And I was the only kid in my city that had Chuck Mangione records, because my dad knew of him because he was from Rochester. So there's the jazz side of it. Then there was a heavy country influence. We had Waylon Jennings records, Johnny Cash records. We have the Doobie Brothers, of course. I had a friend that was obsessed with Led Zeppelin, and he would make me listen to Led Zeppelin constantly.
So you didn't have any choice. It was getting...
I didn't have any choice. And hearing Led Zeppelin when you're a kid, after you'd heard what was going on the radio at the time, it's like, wow, it's kind of mind-blowing. Jimmy Page was a huge influence because I thought he was, at the time, the greatest guitarist, until I heard Eddie Van Halen. And then when I had the first Van Halen record, that was a game changer for me. I'm like, wow, this guitar can go to some places that it's never been before.
I think some people didn't actually know if that was a guitar when they heard it for the first time.
Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that was another one. Those first two Van Halen albums I actually wore out to the point where I had to buy another copy. Then it kind of got into the college years where I started liking the real weird, obscure stuff. And obscure, when you live in Loveland, Colorado, obscure is the Smiths. Probably not so much for you in the 80s, but that was really weird for us because it wasn't on the radio. We had to drive to Denver to find Smiths records, and that's over an hour from where I live.
How did you hear about them originally then?
In college, people would move in from other towns, and you'd meet them, and they're like, what is this Violent Femmes? Or geez, some of the more obscure ones like Sisters of Mercy. I really liked the.
Yeah.
A lot of the English bands, mate.
So that stuff was pretty tough to track down.
It was, yeah. You had to literally drive an hour because the radio stations around ours wasn't playing it. I did a stint as a DJ one summer I went to a broadcasting workshop and I thought I wanted to be a DJ. So I tried to talk at the station into playing some of this stuff, and they were like, absolutely not. Don't even think about it. Because it was a station that played like soft rock hits, like Sade, Barry Manilow, Lionel Richie, and stuff like that. I'm like, but I'm the midnight to 6 guy. Can't I sneak some of this in? They're like, absolutely not.
How long did that position last for?
I did it for a summer. Just a summer. Yeah, I realized quickly that it wasn't something that I was going to be able to move up quickly in, because there's a lot of old school, old guard there, and I wasn't going to get any good shifts anytime soon. And midnight to 6 is a tough one, and especially when you're going to school. So it just wasn't going to work out. But on my last day, I remember I played, my last shift, I played You Spin Me Right Round, Baby Right Round as a kind of an FU, which totally didn't fit when that song just came out. But yeah, I've gone through I like all music. If it has a good song, I don't care what genre it is. It's all about the song to me.
So what was your kind of first ventures into putting a band together? Because didn't you have a metal band for a brief time in high school called Damon Wild?
Yeah. Yep.
Was that one of your first bands?
I wish you had a way to put pictures up, because that's one of my favorite pictures. You can't even tell who I am. It's funny about that. That's like, we had a couple bands. We had a couple metal bands. We had some really funny names. One was called YOU, because our drummer was into Kiss and he wanted a one-word band name. I was in a band called Pet Nephew. I was in a band called The Strangers. And this was all like early rock, heavy metal stuff. Then when I was going to college, I got into more of the new wave stuff. I'm old, in case you can't tell. I went to school in the 80s. We started a new wave band called The Pastels, and we got a little bit of local success. That was fun. So I've been in metal bands. I've been in new wave bands. And then it came around to when I formed the Railbenders in 2000, I wanted to do something that no one in Denver was doing at the time, and that was playing like 70s style country music, because I just loved it. You know, I was feeling nostalgic about the old school stuff.
Is that different for Denver then? Is there a particular music kind of associated?
So in Denver at the time, this was 2000 when we started, it was just a lot of alternative rock stuff going on. There were bands. There was a country band playing that was like all contemporary country cover kind of stuff, like dance stuff. There was a place called the Grizzly Rose that was doing a lot of that. And no one was really doing the old school stuff. And we couldn't even get a gig at a country club because we were like too traditional or too, this is weird, but too country, because they were trying to do that modern pop stuff. And so we reached out to our friends in the rock scene, and we were playing rock clubs. Here comes these guys with an upright bass and cowboy hats, and we're playing in front of a rock crowd, and we opened up for friends of ours who was very popular at the time, Brother and Fast, and we went over. They ate it up. They loved it. They weren't expecting it. So we just kept going and going and going. And next thing you know, we have crowds lining up outside the door at this little place we were playing called Lincoln's Roadhouse. And it just happened. It just kind of became a cool, magical thing.
Happened pretty fast then.
It did, yeah.
Word of mouth kind of thing.
It did, yeah. So going back to my dad, he was a regular at this little pub called Lincoln's Roadhouse. And it was a blues club. And Jim Bob, the owner, he was telling Jim Bob, hey, you got to hear my son's band. They're really good. And Jim Bob's like, yeah, whatever. It's your son. Come on. Of course you're going to think he's good. He goes, no, you have to give him a shot. Let him play here. He's like, but this is a blues club. I can't have a country band playing in my blues bar. He goes, just give him a shot. You won't regret it. So on Sundays, they would have bands come in, and you could play for your first gig on a Sunday afternoon where nobody's there, right? So we show up on a Sunday, load our gear in, probably 15, 20 people in there. We start playing, and Jim Bob, he's from the South, Tennessee. He comes over and he sits his chair down right in front of us and watches our whole show. And he loved it. Nobody was paying attention to us, but he loved it. Him and my dad loved it. So he's like, come back next week and tell your friends. So we came back the next Sunday, brought more of our friends, and they told some friends. He's like, come back next Sunday. And by the 4th or 5th Sunday, we had that place packed.
Just had a residency
every week.
there.
Had a residency.
How great is that he took to you and said, I'm going to give you this slot and push you and just build it?
Yeah. I mean, in a couple months, we were playing the Friday and Saturday night slots. He moved us, and that was the blues night, right? But we brought more people than the blues bands. Even blues bands that were on tour touring the country, and that was the place where we had to line out the door, down the sidewalk, waiting to get in, one out. And he helped us build that. He eventually said, you guys are too big for this. You got to go play somewhere else. So we thanked him, and we went and played other clubs and went on from there. And here we are 21 years later, still playing.
Where are you pulling influences from for that band? Because like you say, I think you've described it as like 70s outlaw country, and also described as hard country. Definitely
a very specific sound. I can specifically say it comes from Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, Buck Owens. In that realm. During that time, I was going through my old country phase, and I was listening to all these old records and old artists, and it had a direct influence on what I was writing at the time. That's our wheelhouse. We don't really stray much outside of those lines. There's definitely a Railbenders sound. It's a lot of 1-2 beat. It's upright bass. It's a lot of train beats. and a lot about drinking whiskey.
Is this the first band you've sang lead vocals in, or was there previous bands?
There was a short stint where I sang for a swing band in the late 90s. I've always been mostly a lead guitarist for the bands I've been in, but there was a situation where swing was huge for a while. I don't know if you remember that craze when like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy and all these bands were coming out, Roller Crown Review, and there's all this swing dancing fad going on. So we started a swing band, and I got some horn guys together, and I just started singing. And it somehow worked out. I enjoyed it, and I don't have much of a range. I keep it low. You have to know your limits. And I carried that on to the country band. So I guess that was technically my second time singing in a band.
What was the band you had in the early 90s? Is it the Simple Tones?
Yeah, the Simple Tones, yeah. It was kind of a fun, jangly pop alternative sound, influenced by REM, maybe some UK bands like Blur and Stone Roses.
There's a lot of creativity around that time if you looked around for it. I mean, that stuff was massive in the UK. That must have been really cool for you guys in the States if it filtered over to the US.
Oh, yeah. We really enjoyed that music that was coming over. We had some really neat shows. We got to open up for, do you remember Teenage Fan Club?
Yeah. Great band.
Yeah, we opened up for bands like that. It was a really fun time. We had a very successful run.
The Railbenders are still active today, and you've had the chance to play alongside some pretty massive names, such as Willie Nelson and ZZ Top and Chris Christopherson as well. Any other particular highlights? But they're pretty big ones.
Massive. Yeah, we were on festivals with them. We were lucky enough to be invited to play the first ever Stagecoach in Indio, California. It's a massive rock festival, but what they decided to do was keep all of the staging and sound and everything for another week, and they made it a country festival called Stagecoach. And we played the first ever Stagecoach in 2007, and they put us on the stage with Emmylou Harris and Chris Christopherson. I want to say Drive-By Truckers, maybe. Just massive names. It was a pretty amazing thing to be invited to that. We were lucky. Somebody that was running the festival found out about us, liked us. Thank God for the internet. I don't know. And invited us to come out and play that.
Wouldn't have been MySpace around that time where they found you, would it?
Right? Probably was MySpace. It reminds me, I got to check my MySpace messages.
I don't know if anyone can actually still log in there. I have no idea.
I have no idea.
But another project you're involved with, though, is the Hickman Dalton Gang. Is that name a nod to your uncle's old band?
Oh, it's funny you say that, yeah. That was Johnny's idea, Johnny Hickman. He liked, the old Outlaw Gang, the Dalton Gang, and he wanted to incorporate that into the name somehow. But it's funny, you've done your research, I can tell. My uncle had a band called the Dalton Gang as well.
So that's just a total coincidence.
Yeah. Johnny didn't even know about that. Yeah, so I was like, okay, cool. But, Johnny being Johnny, he's like, but my name has to be first. Hickman Dalton Gang. I go, wait, it's alphabetically, it would be Dalton Hickman Gang. He's like, no, Hickman Dalton Gang. He always says, I'm senior partner, bro.
Brilliant. And Johnny Hickman's from the band Cracker. Had you been a fan of those guys from way back?
Yes, absolutely. They were writing some of the most exciting music in the 90s at the time. They kind of broke out, and out of nowhere, here comes this kind of rootsy, Little Feat sounding country band in the midst of all this rock going on that was happening at the time. They didn't sound like anybody. So it was really cool that they were able to break through and get on the radio with that sound. And yeah, I loved that band before I even knew Johnny. And he met his wife at a show, and she was from Colorado, and he moved to Colorado from California. And a mutual friend said, you have to check out this band called the Railbenders. So he came to a show when I was playing my 30th birthday party or something like that. And he walked in the room, and the first thing he saw was me being passed around on top of the crowd. I was crowd surfing. And he said, I got to get to know that guy. So he came backstage after the show and introduced himself. And I was kind of like blowing him like, wait, Johnny from the band Cracker, like the actual band Cracker? And he goes, yeah.
That's a great birthday surprise.
Right? So we became fast friends and started writing together and just hanging out and made a couple records together. And it was amazing. I can't believe that I was lucky enough to collaborate with him.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Would it be around that similar time you got the opportunity to perform with Bo Diddley as well? Everything's happening at once.
That was a really busy time. Yeah, it was Bo Diddley. He used to tour with just a drummer, and they would hire local musicians to play rhythm guitar and keyboards.
Kept that old school thing.
He did.
Running.
It was cool, and it's genius. I mean, it's the blues, 3 chords and the truth. So you'd hire a local bass player, local rhythm guitarist, and a local keyboard player. So the guy at the club called me and said, do you know a bass player and a keyboard player? I'm like, yeah, Tyson. We had Tyson from the Railbenders. And then I also know a keyboard player. So I called them up, and we showed up to sound check, and the drummer was there. Bo wasn't there yet. And he said, all right, here's what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Bo will just start playing, and we just have to follow along. And it's almost always in G. I said, okay, good enough. So we played with Bo Diddley having no clue what he was going to play, and it was terrifying. But after the show, he said, "You guys did great. Thank you." And that was all I needed.
Wow, man. How did you feel during the show? Did you get a chance to take it in, or was you just concentrating all the time?
I wasn't even able to really look at what the crowd was doing. I was just watching Bo and making sure I wasn't going to fuck it up. That was the whole show. I was nervous the entire time. I'm playing with a bona fide legend. I'm on stage with Bo Diddley, goddamn.
And I'm not winging it, but I have no idea where it's headed.
Yeah, just had to, luckily he's like an open tuning guy and he doesn't really have a lot of leeway to go. So it was almost the entire night was almost in the same key, which made it easy. That made it a lot easier.
Was there any of your family there or anyone to see it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I had friends and family there. It was a pretty awesome experience having everyone there. We were on a high for sure, Cloud 9.
Also in 2007, the Hickman Dalton gang were invited to perform at Circus Mexicus by some band called Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers.
Exactly.
How did they hear about you guys, and how familiar were you with the band or previously the Refreshments?
Yeah, so there's where the whole connection comes into RCPM. Johnny had already known Roger. They were friends. Roger's a big Cracker fan. Used to go see them all the time before he was even in a band himself. And Roger heard that Johnny was working on a project with some kid that he didn't know from Colorado named Jim Dalton. That's me. And he goes, "I like your record. I want you guys to come out and play Mexico with us." So Johnny told me about this festival. I didn't know anything about it. This is 2007, I believe, in October of 2007. So we go down and we're in this beautiful place where all these people are convening for music. And I was like, what a cool thing. That was my first Circus Mexicus experience. And Johnny and I got on stage in front of all these people just as a duo, an acoustic duo. You could tell they were music-centric people and loving it and having a great time. And I just really liked it. And that's kind of when I first met Roger. Got to know him a little bit there, but not much. It was a festival and he's busy. But a few months later, he came to Denver and he asked us to open up for him. He was doing a solo show in Fort Collins. And so Hickman Dalton was opening up for Roger Clyne. And then we were backstage just having fun, playing songs and trading riffs and jokes and stuff. And he's like, "Hey, I want to call you guys up to jam with me." And I didn't know any of his music. So, all right, sure. We got on stage and we ended up playing an extra hour, the three of us, messing around, playing songs, maybe covers we knew. And that was the start of a thing called the Three Amigos. We had so much fun that instead of him doing this, he would do an annual solo show for this club they were big fans. So instead of him playing, he wanted to have it become the Three Amigos where we all play together.
So a band was formed that night, a whole new project.
Yeah, whole new project. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's so much going on. Yeah, Three Amigos, and we've done that every year since. We even did it during 2020. Three Amigos was the last show before everything shut down.
How was it for you going to Circus Mexicus, and was it inspiring to see an independent band working in this way, being able to create something on their own?
Incredibly inspiring. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, and still is unlike anything I've ever seen. That they took this little rooftop cantina of 50 people the one year into 5,000 people out in this massive desert, this big stage by the ocean. It's not an easy feat to do that. You're getting all this equipment through the desert, a 4-hour journey from Phoenix, and all these staging and lighting and all the vendors that they brought in. And it's incredible what they have done. Circus Mexicus is truly an amazing feat done by just a small independent band. I've been doing it for a long time now, and I'm still blown away by how it gets better and better.
How long after that initial meeting with Roger did you get the call to join the band?
Boy, that was probably a couple of years. Yeah, after meeting him, yeah.
So you'd done the Three Amigos thing a couple of times?
We had, yeah. We did it maybe 3 years, maybe 3 years. Yeah, because I think I joined the band in 2009. So it was a couple of years after meeting him. So it was funny how that happened. I was in the Railbenders. I was working as a real estate appraiser, so music was kind of my side thing. And Roger called one day. I didn't know he had my number. He got my number from their manager at the time, Kira, because she had my number because she would do the booking with me. So he calls me out of the blue one day, and he goes, "Hey, Jim, it's Roger Clyne." And I hadn't talked to him in a while. I go, "Oh, hey, what's up?" I thought he was maybe going to have another show we were going to play with him. And he said, "Hey, well, nobody knows about this, but we're parting ways with our guitarist." He said, I was wondering if you'd want to come out and audition. We're going to hold auditions. And I go, "Oh, really? Well, And I hadn't thought of, I'm like, is this a full-time thing, or do you just need help temporarily, or what? I didn't really know. He just said, "Yeah, we just want to hear some people." And I go, "Cool. How many guys you got lined up?" He's like, "Oh, about 10. I go, "Well, I'm sorry to say that I'm kind of embarrassed to say I don't know your music." He goes, "Oh, that's okay. I'll send you some CDs." I go, "Okay." So I had a FedEx package on my doorstep the next day of the entire catalog. And called them back and like, there's like 100 songs on here. And the auditions are Monday. This was on a Wednesday. I was flying out the next Monday. And he's like, okay, I'll email you 30 songs to learn. 30 songs by Monday.
Just break it down to 30.
Yeah, so let's see. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 4 days, 30 songs. Okay.
And it's going to be the lead parts as well.
Yeah. And they're damn good guitarists, you know. These guys are incredible guitarists. I remember like being up all night Wednesday till like 3 a.m. learning these songs. And I woke up Thursday morning, got my coffee, had to do a couple appraisal reports, knocked those out.
So you're still juggling the day job as well.
Yeah. And so I had stayed up Thursday probably till midnight, and I was just getting exhausted. And then Friday, I remember we had plans, so I couldn't work on it. And Saturday, I had to mow the yard and trim and all that. And
it's sometimes good, though, I think, to do that. Just take a break from it and see if it's sunk in.
Yeah. And then Sunday, I had to do the refresher. And so I flew out Monday morning, and Roger picked me up at the airport and drove me to PH's house. He has a studio, and it was PH and Nick were waiting there. And Roger introduced me to the guys, and PH looks at me and he's like, "He kind of looks like Brian Blush." That's the first thing he said. And then he didn't say anything else to me. We started playing.
Do you remember the first song you did?
Yeah, it was Banditos.
Yeah.
I guess that was the benchmark. If I could do that, maybe I had a chance. Because he said, we want you to play it true to the original, you know. And I did. I learned it note for note. Maybe. I feel like I learned it note for note, but Brian would probably have something else to say about it. You're missing that one part. So we jammed for a good 2 hours. And then Roger said, "Hey, I'm going to take a break. Hey, PH and Nick, come outside with me." So they all took off and they went out in the courtyard. And I'm sitting there by myself. I'm like, all right, they're going to let me go. Or they're going to say, okay, we're going to listen to some other guys and make a decision. But they came back in, and Roger said, this is after 15 minutes or so. No, probably not that long. It felt like forever. And they said, "Hey, so we think we've heard enough to know that you can do this gig if you want it. So think about it. If you want the job, it's yours. You know, you're hired. You let us know, and we'll call off the other auditions." So they felt like they didn't need to hear anybody else, which was really flattering to me. So took me back to the airport, and yeah, it was that same day. It was the same day flight kind of thing. I was sitting there at the airport, and I'm like thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. They told me it was what was entailed and how much I'd be making, and I thought I could make it work. You know, I can play full time and get rid of the appraisal gig. Well, I actually at the time I said I was going to do appraisals on the side still and still make some side money, have a side hustle. But that didn't work out. It was just not possible to do with all the traveling. You have to be physically present to be a real estate appraiser.
Yeah.
So that eventually faded away, but I took this stance that I would help them out, you know, for a year until they got their full-time guy. You know, hey, let's try this for a year, help you out. And then if it's not working for either of us, we can go our own separate ways and be happy, shake hands.
That's a good way of doing it. Because, I mean, it's not only the playing, it's the personalities and the traveling together and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So here I am 12 years later, still helping him out.
Is that how it is? You're still helping?
Yep.
Still the new guy, just filling in for a while.
Yep, just filling in.
Amazing. How easy is it to navigate the geography of everybody?
Yeah, that was a big deal because I have 2 kids and they were at school and I didn't want to move to Arizona. And that was not an issue. Roger's like, no problem. We'll tell you where the first date is. You fly there and you jump on the bus and then you fly home. It hasn't been a geographical issue at all. And, you know, with technology, I was able to do some of the recording for some of the records from home and send it to him. Most of the stuff, when we do a record, we get together and we hole up for a week or so and play together and get most of the stuff knocked out. But we can still write together. We don't have to be physically together.
How could you compare the love for this band to anyone else? Because it's very unique. The fan base's reaction to that band, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
It is. It's very special. It's very special. It's a unique fan base. Incredibly supportive. It's a family. They are a community that kind of looks out for each other and takes care of each other. It's very, very cool. It's much more than the music that they're drawn to. It's the community.
It's great to see. It's wonderful. And finally, you've got a great new album set for release, In My Head. Is this a mixture of old and new material? I recognize some of the songs have been around for a while, but is it a combination of old stuff and new stuff put together? Yeah.
You know, I've never actually made a proper studio record with my solo stuff, but I've been playing solo shows for a long time now. I guess one of the goals of this project was so that I wouldn't have to say no to somebody who is at one of my solo shows and wants to buy a CD. Do you have a CD? No.
That's the whole reason.
That's the whole reason. No, more to it than that. I also wanted to have something. It's very odd. Like, I get more and more solo offers, and it's very weird when promoter or club promoter says, where can I listen to your stuff? I don't have anything on Spotify.
You could give them links to about a dozen different bands, but nothing specifically which says Jim Dalton.
Well, here's a YouTube iPhone video that somebody shot at one of my shows. So now I feel like I'm being more legitimate by having a proper album out. And what it is you asked about old and new. It is old and new. It's a lot of older stuff. Like the reason some of these are kind of dated is because about 2 years ago, PH approached me and he said, hey, we have a new studio my friend is starting up and it's really nice and you should record some of your songs. And me and Nick will do the drums and bass. I'm like, awesome. So we did that. We did a batch of songs. Most of them made the record. About 3 or 4 didn't. And those drums and bass were recorded 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I didn't get around to doing anything because I was too busy. But then the pandemic hit. So I pulled up those sessions and then added a few new ones with some other friends. And that's how it kind of happened. So yeah, they're mostly old. There's a couple new ones on there.
It's great, man. Where does the lyrical humor come from? Does that draw from a specific influence? Because it's great. I was just smiling and chuckling all the way through listening to it. It's great.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah. I mean, most of the record is silly and that's intentional because I didn't want to make a pandemic record that was pandemic related. I wanted to have a little diversion for people based on all the crap we're going through. So the lyrical, I've always been drawn to just silly songs, and a lot of that stems from my uncle. He used to have funny songs. I like that he was making people laugh with music, and I like to do that with music, as well as I'm not always a jokester, jokey joke maker. I like my serious stuff too, but I can tell you specifically where a lot of my influences come from for my solo shows. And that was when I saw Bob Schneider perform by himself. And I got a lot of ideas from him as far as like he uses a looper. When you're playing solo, you want to try to make it interesting. So when I play live, I like to use a looper so that I can solo and I can do other things and use vocal effects. So I got a lot of that from him, watching him. And I also got the humor side from him. He has some just insanely funny songs.
He's like someone who you'd expect to be like super serious, but then as you're listening, it's like, no, this is like really funny. A real fine line.
Yeah. And that's where I kind of got a lot of, it's okay to be funny. You can be yourself. You can do a serious song and then you can do a funny song. You don't have to do all of one thing, you know? And that's what makes his show so exciting and fun to watch. He's all over. You never know what you're going to get. So I kind of took that and incorporated it into my solo stuff where I'm going to use my 8th grade humor, my dick jokes. I even have this new thing. It's a patent pending. I made a dick pic. I drew a dick on a pic and I call it my dick pic and I give those out. It's got my signature on the back.
Oh, I got to get one of them. That's awesome.
You got it, brother. I'm going to see if I can patent that and then I can license it to other bands. But, so I thought, okay, it's okay to be yourself and let loose. And so that's what I do with the solo stuff. And I write. I don't have any specific genre. I have country in my solo stuff. I have even Latin sounding stuff, folk songs, rock stuff. So what I tried to do with this record is make it a little bit of all of that. You know, you get a little bit of everything.
It's great, man. It's great. Did your Uncle Terry, did he record much stuff?
He had one studio album. Yep.
Yeah. You never re-recorded any of his stuff as a little tribute or anything?
Yes, we did. We recorded one of his songs on Hickman Dalton Volume 1. It was called Just an O Picker. Yep, that was my uncle's song. And a Railbenders album, Showdown, has a song of his called Hold Out in Time that we still play. We still do those on a regular basis.
That's great. Just keep the name out there and the music still going.
Absolutely.
Jim, thank you ever so much, mate. I've loved catching up with you.
Thank you, Rob. I know I rambled on. I know you can edit out the boring bits.
No, it's wonderful, man. It's great. Really, really cool. I've loved filling in the gaps and all that kind of thing. I got to say, you're a great podcaster. I'm working on it. And you actually did research. That's impressive. Everything's on the internet, mate. You can find everything. Spend a few hours scrolling through things. That's both nice and scary. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening to my ramblings, and thanks for having me on this. Appreciate you, brother. Well, I just realized the song is not very long, and if I really want it, I could go on and on, but I think that I've said everything I wanted to say, so I'll just keep it short and sweet. I think it's better that way. It's better that way. It's better that way. It's better that way. How great was Mr. Jim Dalton? Thanks so much to Jim for joining me here on the show, and please be sure to check out his brand new solo album, In My Head, which is available over at jimdaltonmusic.com, along with a ton of other music from Jim's other projects. If you're a new listener to the show, then there are over 100 more episodes to listen to and catch up on over at stvpod.com. along with some STV music, videos, and merch. And if you enjoy any of these talks, then it would be amazing if you would share them with friends who may also like to tune in. And don't forget the Straight to Video Patreon over at patreon.com/STVpod is the place where you first get to hear about new guests and get exclusive access. But to be honest, each and every bit of support you give to this show is massive in my book, so thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and there's lots more to come over the next couple of weeks. So as always, thanks for listening, take care, and speak soon.